The thing about being married to someone who thinks they're smarter than you is that eventually they get sloppy. They start believing their own press releases. They forget that the quiet guy refilling the chip bowl at parties might actually be paying attention to every word. My name is Hale Trenwick, and I've been watching my wife Kiera slowly transform from the ambitious woman I married into something else entirely. Something that wore designer clothes bought with money I earned, spoke in corporate buzzwords she learned from seminars I funded, and smiled with teeth whitened by a dentist whose bills came to my consulting account. The cafe where she dropped the bomb was one of those trendy places downtown where they charge $8 for coffee, and the baristas all look like they're auditioning for indie films. Kiera had suggested we meet there instead of talking at home, which should have been my first clue. She never wanted witnesses to our private conversations unless she was planning something theatrical. "Hale," she said, stirring her oat milk latte with the kind of deliberate precision she used when delivering bad news to her subordinates. "We need to discuss our situation." I looked up from my plain black coffee. No fancy additions, just like everything else about me that apparently embarrassed her these days. "What situation is that?" "My colleagues at the firm have been very direct with me lately." She paused, letting that sink in like she was announcing quarterly earnings to shareholders. "They think you're living off me, and they've suggested someone more suitable for my position." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I could have argued, could have reminded her that my electrical consulting business generated 60% of our household income. Could have mentioned that the firm where she worked as an HR director was a mid-tier tech startup that burned through venture capital faster than a teenager with a credit card. Instead, I nodded and said, "I agree." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't the script she'd rehearsed. "You agree?" "Completely." I stood up, grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair, and checked my watch. "You deserve someone who fits better with your colleagues' expectations." The confusion in her eyes was almost worth the months of subtle insults and casual humiliations I'd endured. Almost. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To handle some business." I pulled out my phone and sent a calendar invite to her work email while she watched. The subject line read, "Contract amendments, effective immediately. Check your messages in about 10 minutes." I walked out of that cafe without looking back, but I could feel her stare burning into my shoulders. 2 blocks away, I found a bench outside the old Union Hall where I'd started my career 15 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, returning to my roots while my wife tried to bury hers. My laptop connected to the cafe's Wi-Fi from here. Funny how these tech places never secured their networks properly. I opened the business management portal that controlled my consulting contracts and began executing changes I'd prepared weeks earlier. See, the thing about being an electrical consultant is that you learn to think systematically. Every circuit has a source, a load, and a return path. Cut the right wire, and the whole system goes dark. I'd been mapping the circuits of my marriage for months, waiting for Kiera to give me a reason to flip the switch. My consulting business operated through a shared billing account that made it look like Kiera's company was the primary contractor. It helped with her image at work, made her seem more connected and successful than she actually was. Her colleagues saw those big contract numbers flowing through her network and assumed she was the rainmaker. They were about to learn otherwise. I transferred my consulting contracts out of the shared billing account, reassigned payment endpoints to my personal business entity, and detached my name from the firm-facing profile Kiera used to showcase our income. Every keystroke felt like cutting another wire in a system that had been electrocuting me slowly for months. My phone buzzed with a text from Kiera. "Having drinks with the team to celebrate new beginnings. Thanks for being mature about this." I almost laughed. She was probably back at her office by now, surrounded by her inner circle, reshaping the narrative about how she'd finally removed the supposed burden holding back her career. I could picture them clustered around Shannon's desk, Shannon from accounting, always eager for office chatter, treating everyone else's affairs as her own source of amusement. Another text. Tessa wants to know if you'll be moving out this weekend. She has a friend who might be interested in the house. Tessa. The wannabe influencer who documented every piece of office drama for her private blog that somehow always ended up being not so private. She was probably already composing the post about Kiera's liberation from her loser husband. I finished the contract transfers and opened the firm dashboard that Kiera's colleagues would be using to toast her newfound freedom. The system updated in real time, which meant they were about to get a very different picture of her financial situation. My phone rang. Kiera's ringtone. I'd never gotten around to changing it from that cheerful chime that used to make me smile. Hale, what did you do? Her voice had lost all its corporate smoothness. The dashboard is showing errors. No errors, I said, watching a pigeon pick at crumbs near my feet. Just accuracy. The renewals followed the owner of record, not the spouse. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, you can't do this. Actually, I can. I did. Check your email. I'd sent her the executed amendments, the new payment confirmations, and the separation notice I'd filed that morning. All legal, all documented, all irreversible. My colleagues are here, she whispered. They're asking questions. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them you're about to find out what your actual market value is. I hung up and sat there for a moment, listening to the sounds of the city around me. Traffic humming past, construction crews working on the building across the street, normal people living normal lives without having to calculate the social and financial implications of every conversation with their spouse. The funny thing about revenge is that people expect it to feel hot, explosive, satisfying in the moment. But this felt cold and precise, like troubleshooting a circuit that's been shorting out for months. You don't get angry at the faulty wire. You just replace it. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Arjun, my old friend from the union days who'd moved into IT consulting. We'd kept in touch over the years, mostly because he was one of the few people who understood both the technical side of my work and the political side of Kiera's. Hale, man, you just made Shannon's day very interesting, he said without preamble. You're still in touch with Shannon? I asked. We dated for about 5 minutes last year. She still texts me when the office drama gets good. He paused. She just sent me a screenshot of your wife staring at a computer screen like it personally insulted her mother. Despite everything, I smiled. How's the team taking it? Well, Tessa just deleted a half-written blog post about successful women shedding their baggage, and someone named Mick from HR is asking very pointed questions about whether Kiera actually has the client relationships she claimed during her last performance review. Mick. I'd met him at a few company parties. Lyle's wingman, the kind of guy who laughed too loud at his own jokes and thought harassment training was optional. If he was asking questions, it meant the implications were starting to ripple through the office hierarchy. Speaking of Lyle, Arjun continued, Shannon says he's been very quiet since the dashboard updated. Apparently, he's the one who's been pushing Kiera to upgrade her personal situation. Lyle Brant. Kiera's boss, the self-styled progressive tech entrepreneur who drove a custom Mustang and posted gym selfies on LinkedIn with captions about optimizing human performance. He'd been circling my wife like a shark for months, and I'd been watching him do it. How quiet? I asked. The kind of quiet that suggests he just realized his meal ticket might not be as valuable as advertised. I stood up and started walking toward my truck. Arjun, you still have access to the company's internal communication systems? Hypothetically speaking, if someone were to accidentally forward me certain group chat screenshots, I might see them. Hypothetically speaking, I might be interested in seeing how this plays out. I'll keep my eyes open, he said. But Hale, be careful. Cornered animals bite. After he hung up, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching the late afternoon shadows stretch across the parking lot. The old Union Hall looked smaller than I remembered, but solid. Built to last by people who understood that real strength comes from foundation work, not flashy facades. My phone buzzed with another text from Kiera. "We need to talk. Tonight." I typed back, "No, we don't. You wanted someone better. Go find him." But I knew this was just the beginning. Kiera wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully, and Lyle wasn't the type to let a potential asset walk away without a fight. They'd regroup, strategize, probably try to turn this around somehow. That was fine. I'd been preparing for this conversation for months, and I had a lot more circuits to cut. The sun was setting behind the downtown skyline, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Somewhere across town, my wife was probably explaining to her colleagues how this was all a temporary setback, how she'd bounce back stronger than ever. She had no idea what was coming next. The thing about living in a mid-sized Rust Belt city is that everyone knows everyone, especially in the professional circles that Kiera thought were so exclusive. Word travels fast when someone's carefully constructed image starts cracking, and by the time I got home that evening, my phone was already buzzing with messages from people I hadn't heard from in months. My house, our house technically, though not for much longer, sat in one of those neighborhoods that had been blue-collar respectable when we bought it and was now transitioning into something Kiera called emerging professional. Translation: the property values were rising fast enough to make her feel successful, but not fast enough to escape the fact that our neighbors were still mostly union workers, teachers, and small business owners. I pulled into the driveway and noticed Kiera's Audi wasn't there yet. Good. That gave me time to prepare for whatever dramatic scene she was planning. Inside, the house felt different somehow. Maybe it was knowing that this performance was almost over, or maybe it was the way the late afternoon light hit the kitchen where we'd shared coffee and morning conversations, back when we still talked to each other instead of at each other. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, a local brewery that Kiera always complained about because it wasn't sophisticated enough for her tastes, and settled into my workshop in the basement. This was my space, filled with electrical testing equipment, project plans, and the comfortable chaos of actual work. My laptop chimed with an email from Arjun. The subject line read, "Hypothetical Entertainment." Inside was a screenshot of what appeared to be a group chat between Kiera, Shannon, Tessa, and someone named Mick. The timestamp showed it was from about an hour ago. Shannon: "Girl, what just happened upstairs? Lyle looked like someone stole his lunch money." Kiera: "Hale's having some kind of breakdown, trying to sabotage my contracts out of spite." Tessa: "Can he actually do that legally?" Kiera: "He thinks he can. We'll see about that." Mick: "Wait, those were his contracts? I thought you brought those clients in." Shannon: "Awkward." Tessa: "Maybe this is actually good? Like now you can focus on finding someone who actually supports your ambitions instead of holding you back." Kiera: "Exactly. Lyle's been very supportive through all this." Shannon: "I bet he has." Mick: "Lyle's support comes with strings attached. Just saying." Tessa: "What kind of strings?" Mick: "The kind that end with HR violations if anyone starts paying attention." I stared at the screen, reading between the lines. So Mick knew about Lyle's intentions toward my wife, and apparently wasn't entirely comfortable with the situation. Interesting. My phone rang. Ruth Trenwick, my mother, calling from her retirement community about 20 minutes outside town. "Hale, honey, I just got the strangest call from Kiera," she said without preamble. Mom had never been one for small talk, especially when she smelled drama brewing. "Strange how?" "She wanted to know if I thought you were having some kind of mental health crisis. Said you'd been acting erratically and she was worried about you." I almost laughed. "What did you tell her?" I told her that, in my 43 years as a nurse, I'd learned to recognize the difference between a mental health crisis and someone finally getting tired of being treated like garbage. And she hung up on me. Mom paused. Hale, what's really going on? I gave her the condensed version, the cafe conversation, the contract transfers, the group chat screenshots. Mom listened without interrupting, which was her way of processing information before rendering judgment. So, she's been planning this for a while, she said finally. Looks like it. And this Lyle character has been encouraging her. That's my read on the situation. Well, Mom said, and I could hear the sharp edge in her voice that had terrified my childhood friends and earned the respect of every doctor she'd ever worked with. I hope you're planning to make this educational for both of them. I'm working on it. Good. Your father always said that people who mistake kindness for weakness deserve to learn the difference the hard way. After Mom hung up, I sat in the workshop for a while, thinking about my next moves. The contract transfer had been the opening gambit, a way to establish that I wasn't the helpless dependent Kiera had painted me as. But it was just the first cut in what needed to be a very precise demolition. Upstairs, I heard the front door slam. Kiera was home, and from the sound of her heels clicking rapidly across the hardwood floor, she was not in a conciliatory mood. "Hale!" she called. "We need to talk right now." I finished my beer and headed upstairs. She was standing in the kitchen, still wearing her work clothes but looking less polished than usual. Her makeup was smudged slightly around the eyes, and her hair had lost some of its professional styling. "You embarrassed me today," she said without preamble. "In front of my entire team." "I executed a business decision," I replied. "Nothing more, nothing less. Those contracts were part of our shared assets." "No, they weren't. They were my contracts, routed through your network for convenience. I'm no longer interested in that arrangement." She stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "You can't just unilaterally change our financial structure. Watch me. Lyle says this might constitute financial abuse." And there it was, Lyle's name, dropped into the conversation like she was testing my reaction. I kept my expression neutral. Lyle says a lot of things. Most of them are designed to benefit Lyle. He's been very supportive during this difficult time. "I'm sure he has." Kiera's eyes flashed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that a man who encourages a woman to leave her husband usually has his own agenda." "You're being paranoid." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the group chat screenshot. "Because your friends seem to think Lyle's support comes with strings attached." The color drained from her face as she read the messages. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter? The point is that your little support group isn't as supportive as you think, and your new mentor isn't as altruistic as he pretends to be." She handed the phone back to me, her hands shaking slightly. "You're spying on me." "I'm paying attention. There's a difference. This is harassment. This is information that was freely shared in a group chat. If you wanted privacy, you should have been more careful about who you trusted." She turned away from me, staring out the kitchen window at the neighbor's yard, where old Mr. Peterson was working in his garden. Normal life, continuing as usual while our marriage imploded in slow motion. "I want you out of the house by the weekend," she said quietly. "Interesting. Whose idea was that? Yours or Tessa's?" She spun around. "How did you—" "Lucky guess." I leaned against the counter, studying her face. "Let me ask you something, Kiera. When did you decide I wasn't good enough anymore? Was it gradual, or was there a specific moment when you realized you wanted to trade up?" "It's not about trading up. It's about compatibility, growth, moving in the same direction. And Lyle represents the direction you want to move?" "Lyle understands ambition. He understands what it takes to succeed in today's economy. He understands how to manipulate ambitious women into thinking they need his approval." "You're jealous." "I'm realistic." I stood up and walked toward the stairs. "But you're right about one thing. I will be out of the house by the weekend. Not because you want me gone, but because I'm done pretending this marriage is worth saving." "Where will you go?" I paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her. She was standing in the kitchen where we'd shared breakfast that morning, where she'd probably been planning this conversation while I was reading the news and thinking about weekend projects. "I'll figure it out," I said. "I'm resourceful that way. You might want to mention that to Lyle when you're discussing my shortcomings." I went upstairs and started packing. Not everything. Just enough clothes and personal items to get by for a few days. The rest could wait until I found a more permanent solution. My phone buzzed with another message from Arjun. "Shannon just texted me. Apparently Kiera called an emergency meeting with Lyle for tomorrow morning. Thought you should know." I typed back, "Thanks. Keep me posted." "Will do, and Hale?" Shannon also mentioned that Tessa's been asking a lot of questions about your business, like specific questions about client lists and contract values. That stopped me cold. I sat down on the bed, thinking through the implications. If Tessa was asking about my business details, it meant someone was planning something more sophisticated than just a simple divorce split. I called Arjun directly. "What kind of questions?" I asked when he picked up. "The kind that suggests someone's been doing research." Shannon said Tessa claimed she was thinking about starting her own consulting business and wanted to understand the market. "But you don't buy it." "I don't buy anything Tessa says. She couldn't consult her way out of a paper bag, and we both know it." I looked around the bedroom that Kiera and I had shared for 8 years. The furniture we'd picked out together, the photos from vacations when we still enjoyed each other's company, the little everyday details of a life that was about to become evidence in a legal proceeding. "Arjun, I think they're planning to steal my client list." "That would be incredibly stupid. It would also be incredibly profitable if they could pull it off." "Can they?" I thought about it. Not legally, but they might try anyway, especially if Lyle thinks he can use his tech connections to poach my contracts. "What do you want me to do?" "Keep listening, and maybe start documenting everything Shannon shares with you." "Already on it." After I hung up, I finished packing and carried my bags downstairs. Kiera was still in the kitchen, but now she was on the phone with someone, speaking in low, urgent tones. "I don't care what it costs," she was saying. "I want to know what my options are. Yes, I understand the timeline. No, he doesn't suspect anything yet." I cleared my throat and she spun around, ending the call quickly. "Making plans?" I asked. "Consulting with professionals about my rights." "Smart. You're going to need good advice." I headed toward the front door with my bags but stopped in the hallway. On the wall was a photo from our wedding day, both of us smiling, young and optimistic, and convinced we were building something lasting together. "Hale!" Kiera called from the kitchen doorway. "This doesn't have to be ugly." I turned to look at her one last time. "No, it doesn't, but I suspect it will be anyway." "Why?" "Because you're not just leaving me, Kiera. You're trying to destroy me on your way out. And that's where you made your mistake." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. But as I drove away, I could see her silhouette in the kitchen window, phone pressed to her ear again, probably calling Lyle to report that Phase 1 was complete. She had no idea that I'd been planning Phase 2 for weeks. I checked into an extended stay hotel on the other side of town, the kind of place that catered to business travelers and people in transition. Clean, functional, anonymous, perfect for what I needed to do next. The room came with a small kitchenette and a desk where I could set up my laptop. I ordered pizza from a place I'd never tried before and settled in to start the real work. Arjun had been busy. Over the next hour, he forwarded me a steady stream of screenshots and updates from Shannon's increasingly loose lips. Apparently, wine and workplace drama were a dangerous combination for her discretion. The picture that emerged was more elaborate than I'd initially suspected. Lyle hadn't just been encouraging Kiera to leave me. He'd been actively planning how to capitalize on the situation. According to Shannon's reports, Lyle had already reached out to 3 of my biggest clients, positioning himself as Kiera's business partner and suggesting that my departure might create service disruptions they should be concerned about. He was offering to ensure continuity through his own consulting network. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. I spent the evening documenting everything Arjun sent me and cross-referencing it with my own client communications. None of my clients had mentioned Lyle's outreach yet, which suggested they were either being polite or waiting to see how the situation developed. My phone rang around 9 p.m. The caller ID showed my lawyer's office number. "Hale, it's Janet Morrison. I got your message about needing divorce representation." Janet had handled the legal work when I incorporated my consulting business 5 years ago. She was sharp, thorough, and had a reputation for not backing down from fights. "Thanks for calling back so late," I said. "I figured this was urgent when you mentioned your wife might be planning to contest the business assets." She paused. "I did some preliminary research on Kiera's employment situation. Interesting company she works for." "How so?" "They've been through 3 rounds of layoffs in the past 18 months. Not exactly the stable corporate environment she's been portraying." That was news to me. "How did you find that out?" "Public filings. Their venture capital funding has been declining steadily, and their client retention numbers are not impressive." Janet's voice carried the satisfaction of a lawyer who'd found a useful fact. "If I were Kiera, I'd be very motivated to secure alternative income sources. Like my consulting contracts." "Exactly. Which brings me to my next question. How confident are you that your business assets are properly protected?" I'd been thinking about that all evening. "Reasonably confident. The contracts are in my name, the business is incorporated separately from our joint assets, and I've got documentation going back years." "Good. But Hale, if they're planning something sophisticated, you need to be prepared for them to get creative. Corporate espionage, client poaching, reputation attacks. These people play dirty when there's money involved. What do you recommend? Document everything, record conversations when it's legal to do so, and be prepared to move fast if they escalate." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. After Janet hung up, I sat in the hotel room thinking about the conversation. Corporate espionage seemed like an extreme term for what Lyle and Kiera were planning. But then again, I'd been underestimating their ambition for months. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We should talk. Meet me at Murphy's Bar tomorrow at 7 p.m. Come alone. M. Mick." The HR guy from Kiera's company who'd been asking uncomfortable questions in the group chat. This was either a trap or an opportunity. I texted back, "Why?" The response came quickly, "Because you're not the only one who thinks Lyle is a problem." Interesting. Very interesting. The next morning, I drove across town to my regular coffee shop. Not the trendy place where Kiera had ambushed me, but a blue-collar establishment near the Union Hall where the coffee was strong and the conversation was honest. My phone rang as I was ordering. Kiera's number. "Hello, Kiera. Hale, we need to discuss the house situation." "What about it?" "I've spoken with my lawyer, and she says I have a right to exclusive occupancy during the separation period." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that I'm the primary income earner and the house payment comes from my account." I almost laughed. "Kiera, the house payment comes from our joint account, which is funded by both our incomes. And as of yesterday, my income is no longer part of that equation." Silence on the other end. "Then, what do you mean?" "I mean, I've redirected my business income to a separate account. If you want to make the house payment, you'll need to cover it yourself." "You can't do that." "I already did. Check your account balance." More silence. Then, in a smaller voice, "Hale, that's not fair. Fair would have been discussing your concerns about our marriage before announcing to your colleagues that you were looking for someone better. Fair would have been honest communication instead of public humiliation. Fair went out the window when you decided to treat me like a business problem to be solved." "I never meant for it to happen this way." "How did you mean for it to happen?" I thought you'd fight for me, for us." The vulnerability in her voice almost got to me. Almost. But then I remembered the group chat messages, the secret meetings with Lyle, the careful planning that had gone into yesterday's ambush. You thought I'd fight for the privilege of being your safety net while you explored other options, I said. That's not fighting for a marriage, Kiera. That's fighting for the right to be used. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Lyle have been planning this transition for weeks. Lyle has nothing to do with this. Lyle has everything to do with this. He's been in your ear, telling you that you deserve better, that you're too good for your current situation, that he can offer you opportunities I can't match. You're paranoid. I'm informed. There's a difference. I hung up and turned off my phone. I needed to think without constant interruptions, and I had a feeling the day was going to bring more complications. Murphy's Bar was exactly what you'd expect from the name: dark wood, dim lighting, and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged honest conversation. I arrived at 7 p.m. sharp and found Mick sitting in a corner booth, nursing a beer and looking uncomfortable. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the soft build of someone who spent too much time at a desk and not enough time doing physical work. He looked up when I approached, and I could see the nervousness in his eyes. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "Thanks for the cryptic invitation." I signaled the bartender for a beer. "What's this about?" "It's about Lyle and what he's planning to do to you." "I'm listening." Mick looked around the bar, making sure no one was paying attention to our conversation. "I've been working at the company for 3 years. I've seen Lyle operate, and I've seen what happens to people who get in his way. Such as the last consultant who had contracts Lyle wanted. Guy named Peterson, worked in network security. Lyle convinced the board that Peterson's work was substandard, then swooped in with his own solution. What happened to Peterson? Blacklisted. Couldn't get work anywhere in the city. Last I heard, he'd moved to Denver and started over." I took a sip of my beer, processing this information. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Peterson was a good guy who didn't deserve what happened to him, and because I think you're next on Lyle's list." "What makes you think that?" Mick pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of an email thread. "This is from this morning. Lyle's been reaching out to your clients, suggesting that your personal situation might affect your professional reliability." I read through the emails, feeling my anger build with each line. Lyle was positioning himself as a concerned colleague who'd noticed troubling signs in my recent behavior. He was offering to monitor the situation and provide backup support if needed. Has he gotten any responses? 2 clients have asked for meetings. One specifically asked about transitioning their contracts to alternative providers. I handed the phone back to Mick. "Why are you showing me this? What's in it for you?" "Honestly, I'm tired of watching Lyle destroy people, and I'm tired of being part of a company that enables him. You could report him to higher management." Mick laughed bitterly. "Lyle is higher management. He's got the board convinced he's the future of the company. Anyone who challenges him ends up on the layoff list. So what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time someone fought back. Someone who's got nothing left to lose and the skills to make it count." I studied his face, trying to read his motivations. "What kind of skills are we talking about?" "The kind that built a successful consulting business from scratch. The kind that understands how systems work and how to make them fail." He leaned forward. "Lyle thinks he's untouchable because he's got Kiera feeding him information about your business and your clients. He doesn't know that you know what he's planning." "And you think I should use that advantage?" "I think you should protect yourself. And if protecting yourself happens to expose Lyle for what he really is, well, that would be a public service." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us thinking through the implications of what he was suggesting. "What do you know about Kiera's involvement in this?" I asked. "More than you probably want to hear?" Mick finished his beer and signaled for another. "She's been feeding Lyle information about your clients for weeks. Names, contract values, renewal dates, everything." How do you know that? Because I've seen the files on his computer. He's got detailed profiles on every one of your clients, including personal information that could only have come from someone with access to your records. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected that Kiera was planning to leave, but I hadn't realized she'd been actively sabotaging my business while she planned her exit. There's something else, Mick said quietly. Lyle's been promising Kiera a promotion and a significant raise once this all gets resolved. He's positioning her as his new business development director. With my clients as her portfolio. Exactly. I finished my beer and stood up. Mick, I appreciate the information, but I need to ask you something directly. Are you recording this conversation? He looked genuinely surprised. No. Why would I? Because this whole situation is getting complicated, and I need to know who I can trust. You can trust me. But Hale? You can't trust anyone else. Not in this situation. I left Murphy's bar with a lot more information than I'd arrived with, and a much clearer picture of what I was up against. This wasn't just a marriage falling apart. It was a coordinated attack on everything I'd built. But Lyle and Kiera had made one critical mistake. They'd assumed I was the same passive, accommodating person who'd been refilling chip bowls and keeping quiet at parties for years. They were about to learn otherwise. The next morning, I woke up in my anonymous hotel room with a plan forming in my mind. The thing about electrical work is that you learn to think in terms of systems and safeguards. When a circuit overloads, it's usually because someone ignored the warning signs and pushed too much current through wires that weren't designed to handle the load. Lyle and Kiera were about to experience a very educational overload. I started with coffee and a legal pad, mapping out everything I knew about their plan. Client lists, contact information, contract renewal dates, personal details about decision makers, all information that Kiera had access to through our shared business discussions over the years. My phone rang. Janet Morrison, my lawyer. Hale, we need to meet today. I've been doing more research on your wife's company, and there are some things you need to know. What kind of things? The kind that suggest this situation is more urgent than we initially thought. Can you be at my office in an hour? Janet's law firm occupied the top floor of a renovated warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and modern fixtures. She met me in her office, which had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river and a conference table covered with documents. Sit down, she said without preamble. We need to talk about Lyle Brant. She handed me a folder thick with printouts and legal documents. I had my investigator do some background work. Your wife's boss has an interesting history. I opened the folder and started reading. What I found made my stomach tighten with anger. He's done this before, I said. 3 times that we can document. Phoenix, Atlanta, and Portland. Same pattern every time. Identify a successful independent contractor with valuable client relationships. Cultivate a relationship with someone close to them, then systematically undermine and replace them. What happened to the contractors? One went bankrupt and had to start over in a different field. One relocated across the country. One... Janet paused. One took his own life. I set the folder down and stared out the window at the river. Barges moving slowly downstream, carrying cargo to destinations unknown. Normal commerce, continuing while predators like Lyle destroyed lives for profit. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because he's very careful about staying within legal boundaries. Technically, he's never done anything prosecutable. He's just very good at manipulating situations to his advantage. And Kiera? Based on the pattern, she's probably not his first collaborator. Lyle seems to have a talent for identifying people who are ambitious enough to compromise their ethics for the right opportunity. I thought about my wife, sitting in our kitchen just 2 days ago, planning my professional destruction while I read the morning news. What are my options? Legally, we can file for divorce, protect your business assets, and hope he doesn't do too much damage to your reputation before we get everything sorted out. And practically, Janet smiled grimly. Practically, you could beat him at his own game, but that would require you to be willing to get your hands dirty. How dirty? Let me ask you something, Hale. How much do you know about your wife's company's financial situation? Not much. Kiera always handled her own career stuff. Well, I know quite a bit about it now. Janet pulled out another set of documents. They're in serious trouble. The venture capital funding is drying up, the client base is shrinking, and they're about 6 months away from bankruptcy. So Lyle's desperate. Lyle's desperate, which makes him dangerous, but it also makes him vulnerable. She leaned forward across the conference table. Hale, if you could document Lyle's pattern of behavior, if you could prove that he's been systematically targeting independent contractors and stealing their client bases, you wouldn't just be protecting yourself. You'd be protecting every other consultant in the city. What would that require? It would require you to let him think he's winning while you gather evidence. It would require you to be smarter, more patient, and more ruthless than he is. I thought about the 3 other contractors who'd been destroyed by Lyle's tactics, the one who'd taken his own life. What do you need from me? I need you to be willing to document everything. Record conversations when it's legal. Gather evidence of his client poaching attempts. Build a case that's so airtight that when we're done, Lyle Brant will never be able to destroy another person's livelihood. And Kiera? Kiera made her choice. She's an adult who decided to participate in this scheme. The consequences are hers to live with. I left Janet's office with a much clearer sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about stopping a predator who'd been operating unchecked for years. My first stop was the office supply store, where I bought a digital recorder, a new phone with recording capabilities, and a small camera that could be concealed easily. If Lyle wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I had documentation of every move. My second stop was Arjun's apartment. You look different, he said when he opened the door. Focused. I need your help with something. I figured as much when you texted me to clear my schedule. He led me into his living room, which was dominated by multiple computer monitors and enough electronic equipment to run a small television station. What do you need? I told him about my conversation with Janet, about Lyle's history, about the plan to gather evidence. Arjun listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding as he processed the information. So you want to set up surveillance on your own wife and her boss, he said when I finished. I want to document their activities so we can stop them from destroying other people's lives. And if we happen to destroy their lives in the process, then they'll understand what their victims went through. Arjun was quiet for a moment, thinking through the technical and ethical implications. Hale, what you're talking about is complicated and potentially dangerous. More dangerous than letting Lyle continue his pattern? Point taken. He turned to one of his computers and started typing. Okay, here's what we can do, legally. For the next 2 hours, Arjun walked me through the technical aspects of evidence gathering, legal recording methods, digital documentation, secure storage of sensitive information. It was like learning a new trade, except this one was focused on exposing corruption instead of installing electrical systems. One more thing, Arjun said as I was getting ready to leave. Shannon texted me this morning. Apparently, Kiera's been asking a lot of questions about my relationship with you. What kind of questions? Whether you've seemed angry or unstable lately, whether you've mentioned any plans for retaliation. She's fishing for information she can use to paint you as a threat. To justify what they're planning to do to me. That's my read on it. I thought about this as I drove back to the hotel. Kiera was trying to build a narrative that would make their actions seem defensive rather than predatory. If they could claim I was unstable or threatening, it would give them cover for whatever they were planning next. My phone rang as I was pulling into the hotel parking lot. Unknown number. Mr. Trenwick, this is David Chen from Midwest Manufacturing. We've been working together for about 2 years. One of my biggest clients. Hi, David. What can I do for you? Well, I got an interesting call today from someone named Lyle Brant. He said he was a colleague of yours and that there might be some service disruptions due to your personal situation. Here it was, Lyle's opening move. What exactly did he tell you? He suggested that you might be going through some kind of breakdown and that he could provide backup support if needed. He seemed to know quite a bit about our account. David, I want to be completely honest with you. I am going through a divorce, but it has no impact whatsoever on my professional capabilities or my commitment to your projects. That's what I figured. You've always been reliable, and frankly, this Brant guy seemed a little too eager to take over your work. I appreciate your confidence. And David, if anyone else contacts you with similar offers, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know. Absolutely. We value our relationship with you, Hale. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After David hung up, I sat in my truck thinking about the conversation. Lyle was moving faster than I'd expected, which meant I needed to accelerate my own timeline. I called Janet Morrison. It's starting, I told her. Lyle just made direct contact with one of my biggest clients. What did he say? I repeated the conversation with David Chen. Janet listened carefully, asking follow-up questions about the specific language Lyle had used. Good, she said when I finished. That gives us our first piece of documented client interference. Make sure you write down everything David told you with exact quotes if possible. Already done. Excellent. Hale, I think it's time to accelerate our evidence gathering. How quickly can you set up a meeting with Kiera? Why? Because I want you to give her a chance to come clean about what they're planning, and I want you to record her response. That evening, I texted Kiera. We should talk about dividing assets fairly. Can you meet me tomorrow? Her response came quickly. Finally ready to be reasonable? Yes, let's meet. I suggested a coffee shop near her office, public enough to be safe but quiet enough for a private conversation. She agreed to meet at lunchtime. As I prepared for what would probably be our last honest conversation, I thought about the woman I'd married 8 years ago. Ambitious, driven, but also kind and supportive. Somewhere along the way, she'd become someone I didn't recognize. Someone willing to destroy her husband's livelihood for a chance at a promotion and a new relationship. Tomorrow, I'd find out if there was any part of the old Kiera left, or if she'd completely transformed into someone who could participate in Lyle's predatory scheme without conscience. Either way, I'd have it all on record. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and chose a table near the back corner, good acoustics for recording, clear sightlines to the entrance, and enough ambient noise to mask our conversation from other customers. The digital recorder in my jacket pocket was voice-activated and had enough memory for several hours of conversation. Kiera walked in exactly on time, wearing the navy blue suit she always chose for important meetings. She looked around the cafe until she spotted me, then approached with the confident stride of someone who thought she was in control of the situation. "Hello, Hale," she said, sitting down across from me. "Kiera, thanks for coming." She ordered a latte from the server, oat milk, extra shot, the same drink she'd been ordering for 3 years. Some habits never changed, even when everything else did. "So," she said, settling back in her chair, "you said you wanted to discuss dividing assets fairly. I do. But first, I think we should clear the air about what's really happening here." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know about Lyle's calls to my clients. I know about the files he's been building on my business. I know about the promotion he's promised you once this is all resolved." Her face went carefully neutral, the expression she used in HR meetings when she was deciding how much truth to reveal. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Kiera, I have documentation, screenshots of emails, recorded conversations with clients, witness statements from people at your company." "That's impossible." "Is it? Or did you and Lyle just assume I was too passive to fight back?" She leaned forward, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. "Hale, even if what you're saying were true, it wouldn't matter. You can't prove anything illegal. Maybe not illegal, but definitely unethical, and definitely something your company's board would be interested in hearing about." You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other across the small table, and I could see the moment when she realized I wasn't bluffing. The confident facade cracked slightly, revealing something harder underneath. What do you want? She asked. I want you to stop. I want Lyle to stop. I want you both to back away from my business and my clients and focus on your own careers. And if we don't, then I take everything I've documented to your board of directors, to my clients, and to anyone else who might be interested in Lyle's pattern of targeting independent contractors. Kiera laughed, but there was no humor in it. His pattern? Hale, you sound paranoid. Phoenix, Atlanta, Portland. I watched her face carefully as I spoke. 3 other cities, 3 other contractors, same tactics every time. The color drained from her cheeks. How did you? Research, due diligence, the kind of homework you should have done before you decided to partner with a predator. She was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me. Lyle said those other situations were different, that those contractors were actually underperforming, that he was just helping companies make necessary changes. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. She looked down at her hands, wrapped around her coffee cup. The company's in trouble, Hale. Real trouble. There are going to be layoffs, and I need to position myself as indispensable. By helping him steal my clients. By proving I can bring in new business. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I thought maybe you'd just decide to scale back your business, focus on smaller projects. I didn't realize he was planning to destroy you completely. But you gave him the information he needed to try. Yes. The admission hung between us like smoke. I could see the regret in her eyes, but also the fear. She was trapped between her conscience and her survival instincts. Kiera, there's something else you should know about Lyle. What? One of the contractors he targeted in Portland took his own life rather than start over again. Her hand flew to her mouth. That's not... Lyle never said... Lyle doesn't advertise the full consequences of his actions. He just focuses on the benefits for his collaborators. Oh, God! She was staring at me with horror. Hale, I swear I didn't know. But now you do. So what are you going to do about it? She was quiet for several minutes, thinking through her options. I could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Ambition versus conscience, fear versus guilt. If I help you stop him, she said finally, I'll lose my job. If you don't help me stop him, you'll lose your soul. That's easy for you to say. You have your own business. You have options. I have options because I built them. You could do the same thing. With what money? You've frozen me out of our joint accounts. I've protected my business income. There's a difference. She finished her latte and sat back in her chair, studying my face. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to document Lyle's instructions to you. I'm asking you to record conversations where he discusses his plans for my clients. I'm asking you to help me build a case that will stop him from doing this to anyone else. And in return? In return, I'll make sure the divorce settlement is fair. I'll provide references for your job search, and I'll do my best to keep your name out of the final report to your company's board. You do that? After everything? I do that because I still remember who you used to be, and because I think there's still a chance you could be that person again. She was crying now, quietly, trying not to attract attention from other customers. I've made such a mess of everything. Yes, you have, but you can still choose how this ends. What if he retaliates? What if he tries to destroy me the way he's trying to destroy you? Then we'll have evidence of that too, and we'll add it to the case against him. She wiped her eyes with a napkin and looked at me with something that might have been hope. If I do this, if I help you, Does that mean we might be able to work things out? Our marriage, I mean. I'd been dreading this question, but I owed her an honest answer. No, Kiera. Too much has happened. Too much trust has been broken. But it might mean you can live with yourself afterward. She nodded slowly, accepting the truth of what I'd said. Okay, I'll help you, but I need guarantees about my protection. You'll have them. We spent the next hour working out the details of her cooperation. She would continue working with Lyle while documenting his instructions and plans. She would record conversations when possible and report back on his activities. In exchange, I would provide legal protection and financial support during the transition period. As we were getting ready to leave, she asked one more question. Hale, why are you doing this? You could just walk away, start over somewhere else. Why risk everything to stop him? I thought about the contractor in Portland who'd seen no other option than self-destruction. I thought about the pattern of predation that would continue if no one stood up to it. Because someone has to, I said, and because I'm in a position to do it effectively. And because you're angry. Yes, I'm angry. But anger without purpose is just destruction. Anger with purpose can be justice. She left first, walking back toward her office with the weight of our conversation visible in her posture. I sat in the cafe for a few more minutes, reviewing the recording and making notes about her admissions. My phone buzzed with a text from Arjun. Shannon just forwarded me something you need to see. Lyle's planning something big for tonight. I called him immediately. What kind of something? A dinner meeting with 3 of your biggest clients. He's told them it's a transition planning session to ensure continuity of service during your personal crisis. He's moving faster than we expected. Much faster. And Hale? Shannon says Kiera's supposed to be there as his business development director. I looked toward the window, where I could see Kiera walking down the sidewalk toward her office. In a few hours, she'd be sitting in a restaurant with Lyle, helping him steal my clients while secretly recording the conversation. Arjun, we need to be there too. What do you mean? I mean, we need to document this meeting from multiple angles. If Lyle's going to make his move tonight, I want everything on record. That's risky. Everything about this situation is risky. But we're not going to get another opportunity like this. I left the cafe and headed back to my hotel room to prepare for what might be the most important evening of my professional life. Tonight, Lyle Brant would either succeed in destroying my business, or he'd provide me with enough evidence to end his predatory career permanently. Either way, by tomorrow morning, everything would be different. The restaurant Lyle had chosen for his ambush was upscale enough to impress clients, but not so fancy as to seem excessive. Exactly the kind of calculated choice I'd come to expect from him. Arjun and I arrived an hour early and positioned ourselves at the bar, where we could observe the main dining room without being obvious about it. I'd spent the afternoon preparing for this confrontation with the same methodical approach I used for complex electrical installations. Every wire mapped, every connection tested, every possible failure point identified and protected. Kiera arrived first, looking nervous but determined. She was wearing the black dress she usually saved for company presentations, and she carried herself with the professional confidence that had first attracted me to her 8 years ago. She chose a table near the center of the dining room. Good acoustics for recording, visible from multiple angles. Lyle arrived 10 minutes later, and I had to admit he looked the part of a successful tech executive. Expensive suit, confident stride, the kind of practiced smile that probably worked well in boardrooms and networking events. He kissed Kiera on the cheek before sitting down, a gesture that was probably meant to establish their relationship for the benefit of anyone watching. My clients arrived in a group: David Chen from Midwest Manufacturing, Patricia Williams from the hospital system, and Robert Torres from the Municipal Utility District. 3 contracts that represented nearly 40% of my annual income. I activated the recording app on my phone and settled in to watch Lyle attempt to destroy my livelihood. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Lyle began once everyone was seated. His voice carried clearly across the restaurant. "I know you're all concerned about the continuity of your projects given Hale's current situation." "What exactly is his situation?" Patricia asked. "He seemed fine when we spoke last week." "Well, that's part of the problem," Lyle said, leaning forward with practiced concern. "Hale's been very good at maintaining a professional facade, but those of us who work closely with him have noticed some troubling signs." "Such as?" David's voice carried a skeptical edge. "Erratic behavior, missed deadlines, communication issues." Lyle glanced at Kiera, who nodded on cue. "Kiera's been trying to help him manage his workload, but the personal stress is clearly affecting his professional capabilities." "I haven't experienced any missed deadlines," Robert said. "In fact, Hale's always been early with his deliverables." "That's because Kiera's been providing backup support behind the scenes," Lyle explained smoothly. "But with their separation, that safety net is disappearing." I watched Kiera's face as Lyle spoke. She was playing her part, but I could see the discomfort in her expression. The recording device in her purse was capturing every word, building the case against the man who thought he was using her. "So what are you proposing?" Patricia asked. "A smooth transition to my consulting group. We can take over all of Hale's current projects without any disruption to your timelines or budgets." "At what cost?" David's business instincts were clearly engaged. "The same rates you're currently paying, with the added benefit of our expanded capabilities and guaranteed availability." "And what happens to Hale?" Robert asked. Lyle shrugged with calculated indifference. "That's really up to him. If he can get his personal situation under control, perhaps we can find a role for him in our organization. But right now, the priority has to be protecting your projects." I'd heard enough. I stood up from the bar and walked over to their table, arriving just as Lyle was pulling out contract transfer documents. "Good evening, everyone," I said, taking an empty chair from a nearby table. "I hope you don't mind if I join this conversation about my professional capabilities." The silence that followed was electric. David and Patricia looked relieved to see me. Robert seemed amused by the situation. Kiera looked terrified, and Lyle looked like someone who'd just discovered a short circuit in his carefully planned system. "Hale," Lyle said, recovering his composure quickly. "This is inappropriate. We're having a private business discussion." "About my business," I replied, "which makes it my discussion." "You're clearly unstable," Lyle said, his voice rising slightly. "This kind of behavior is exactly what we were discussing." "What behavior? Showing up to defend my reputation against false accusations?" David leaned forward. "Hale, Lyle's been telling us that you've been missing deadlines and that Kiera's been covering for you." "David, when was the last time I missed a deadline on your projects?" "Never. That's why this whole conversation seemed strange." I turned to Patricia. "How about you? Any missed deadlines or communication issues?" "None. You've always been completely professional." Robert was smiling now. "I'm starting to think we've been fed some creative fiction here." Lyle's face was flushing red. "You people don't understand the situation. Hale's going through a breakdown, and it's affecting his judgment." "The only breakdown I see is in your ethics," I said. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "Would you like to hear some recordings of your attempts to poach my clients? Or would you prefer to explain your track record in Phoenix, Atlanta, and Portland?" The color drained from Lyle's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Same pattern every time. Identify a successful independent contractor. Cultivate a relationship with someone close to them, then systematically undermine and replace them." Kiera was staring at Lyle with growing horror. "You said those other situations were different." "They were different," Lyle snapped. "Those contractors were actually incompetent." "Like the one in Portland who took his own life rather than start over?" I asked quietly. The table went completely silent. Patricia gasped. David's face hardened with anger. Robert looked like he was reconsidering every assumption he'd made about the evening. That wasn't my fault, Lyle stammered. Maybe not directly, I said. But it was the predictable result of your tactics. I turned to my clients. David, Patricia, Robert, I want you to know that my personal situation has no impact on my professional commitments. My divorce is proceeding amicably, and my business operations are completely unaffected. What about the erratic behavior Lyle mentioned? Patricia asked. The only erratic behavior has been Lyle's attempts to steal my clients based on false information provided by my soon-to-be ex-wife. I looked at Kiera. Information she's now documenting for the authorities. Kiera pulled the recording device from her purse and set it on the table next to my phone. Everything he's said tonight is being recorded. Everything he's planned is documented. Lyle stared at the device like it was a live grenade. You can't record me without my consent. Actually, in this state I can, Kiera said. Single-party consent law. I only need my own permission to record conversations I'm part of. You set me up. You set yourself up, I said. We just documented the process. Lyle stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is harassment. I'm calling the police. Please do, I said. I'd love to explain to them how you've been systematically targeting independent contractors for years. Instead of calling anyone, Lyle stormed out of the restaurant, leaving his contract transfer documents scattered on the table. The other diners were staring now, drawn by the raised voices and obvious drama. David picked up one of the documents and read through it. These contracts would have transferred all your work to his company at the same rates, but with a significant markup built in. He would have been making money off your work while paying you a fraction of the original contract value, Patricia added. If he paid you at all, Robert said grimly. These documents don't include any guarantees of subcontractor payments. I gathered up the papers and handed them to Kiera. More evidence for the file. We spent the next hour at that table, with my clients asking detailed questions about Lyle's approach and my plans for ensuring continued service. By the end of the conversation, all three had reaffirmed their contracts with me and expressed interest in expanding their projects. As we were preparing to leave, Patricia pulled me aside. Hale, I want you to know that even if your personal situation had been affecting your work, we would have talked to you directly rather than going behind your back. I appreciate that. And I want you to know that what Lyle tried to do tonight was disgusting. If there's anything we can do to help you stop him from doing this to other people, just ask. David and Robert echoed similar sentiments. By the time I walked out of that restaurant, I had not only protected my client relationships, but gained 3 powerful allies in the case against Lyle. Kiera and I stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, both of us processing what had just happened. I can't believe he just abandoned me like that, she said. That's what predators do when they're cornered. They cut their losses and run. What happens now? Now we take all this evidence to your company's board and to the authorities. We make sure Lyle never gets the chance to destroy another person's livelihood. And us. Us? I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 8 years, who'd betrayed me and then helped me expose her co-conspirator. We get divorced, and we both try to learn from this experience. I'm sorry, Hale, for all of it. I know you are, and that matters, even if it doesn't change anything. She got into her car and drove away, leaving me standing under the streetlights with my phone full of recordings and my business intact. Tomorrow I'd start the process of formally destroying Lyle's career and protecting other contractors from his predatory tactics. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The circuit was complete, the current was flowing in the right direction, and the system was finally working the way it was supposed to. Justice, it turned out, was a lot like electricity. It followed the path of least resistance until someone built a better conductor. I'd just finished building a very effective conductor indeed. 3 weeks later, Lyle Brant was terminated from his position and banned from working in the tech industry anywhere in the region. Kiera found a new job with a non-profit organization, taking a significant pay cut, but gaining the chance to rebuild her professional reputation. I kept my clients, expanded my business, and started a consulting practice specifically focused on helping independent contractors protect themselves from predatory tactics. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's building something better than what was destroyed. But the satisfaction of watching a predator face consequences for his actions? That was pretty good too.